There, good morning. There is so much hype around the whole Bitcoin movement, and one of the things that I'm coming across as I find out more and more about the process of collecting and accumulating whole coins or satoshis, it doesn't really matter, but I think collecting them is the most important thing. One of the challenges that I keep coming across is the fact that people don't seem to understand it as Kalimera, as a form of lifestyle that completely complements everything else you do. So you might be working full time and collecting satoshis. You might be like me at the end of a working life and in that kind of strange mix that I think we find as freelancers, where you are between retirement and in a different way of thinking, where you don't have the same fixed income coming in every month, and you have investments, of which Bitcoin is one and is probably a significant one at some point, but when you're starting out, obviously it isn't, because you're just in the process of working through it and finding ways of accumulating your satoshis. But there are moments of confusion. There are times when you think to yourself, am I doing the right thing? Yesterday I was transferring coins to a ledger from the exchange where I've been accumulating them over the last year and a half, almost 2 years. And it was the first time I've ever transferred to a ledger, but I was scared that I had a quantity on the exchange. By some people's standards, very little. By other people's standards, quite a lot. It doesn't matter. We're just talking about the generics. But I think Bitcoin has a place in your portfolio. I've talked previously on other videos about writing, where I find it helpful as a writer to have dividend income that comes in every month from a range of stocks, about 30 stocks that I have long held, and which I add to fairly frequently. But as a writer, it's important to have income that I can rely on when I no longer have a mainstream job. There are various legs to the table that I have. When I use that analogy, I'm talking about if you have a four-legged table and all the legs are strong, you have a stable platform on which to write, or at which to sit with your family and eat, or whatever. But having different legs on the platform is really important. So my main income for me is rental income, and that is good for our family because we have individual tenancies in different places, and those incomes are strong. I've had better paying jobs than I have rental income, but now I have rental income that is far better than regular job activity that I have. Another income is money from YouTube. It's tiny. It's, tens of pounds a week, if I'm lucky. But that will grow over time, and I'm confident about it because it's a platform that I enjoy and I'm happy about. The other leg on this four-legged table is income from writing. So that's books that are sold on the Amazon platform, but it's also one of the audiobooks that does well. That's an additional income that when I first started receiving it, I was quite surprised by and hadn't ever expected it to grow as it has done. But that works. And then the other sort of income that I get is from the one-to-one calls and the time with people who want to look at diversifying their activity and considering, for example, being self-employed or making the move from self-employment or making the move into freelance activity from having held down a job for several years. So those are my sources of activity that each generate income, and it works for me. I think one of the things we have to look at, I'm going to try this road down here because it looks interesting in the sense that I've got no idea where it goes. But retirement isn't necessarily where we're all at any given point, but diversification is a practical thing to do. I've talked about the stocks and shares. Those do give me an income that I appreciate, but I generally don't trade. I'm not a very active trader. I had a period about a year ago when I was very much looking for income, and every week I would sell and rebuy different stocks. Just look at these. Absolutely stunning. A distance from being picked, but really, really beautiful crops. Morning. What a gorgeous walk I'm having this morning. So, do you have a practical approach to generating income? While you're working and you've got a regular income, it's hugely important. But if you are already at the retirement stage and you've identified how you can survive and what sort of incomes you need to be safe or comfortable in your retirement, then that's very good. But think about the things that you have. I think Bitcoin is one of the things that a lot of people of my age, I'm in my very early 60s, don't yet understand, haven't started to take seriously, or which we are dismissive of out of pure ignorance. It doesn't take a lot of time, maybe a few hours a week. I would say for me it's been a few hours a day for the last few years of looking at Bitcoin, looking at podcasts, some YouTube content, reading things like the Bitcoin Standard was a very good book. Just educating yourself in all the things that will be useful and helpful to find out how you could live a better life right now. Because the other thing about retirement is people think, oh, I'm going to work for 30 years, 40 years. That was what we were taught at school, and it was the only option that existed for us. But we had a process where we would take advice from a teacher or an adult who knew more about life than we did, and therefore you do what your elders teach you or suggest to you. And then we jump into a lifelong career. That never worked for me. I've never been the sort of person that can stay very long in a career. Maybe 5 or 6 years has been the longest I've ever stayed in any given organisation, because then I learn more, I find another set of challenges, and I move on to do different things. But finding a base income that you're happy with, and knowing that it comes from different sources or is divisible into different revenues that come from a variety of activities, is really helpful. And I am absolutely convinced that Bitcoin, whether you hodl it, you hold on for dear life, or you choose sometimes, when you have the right quantities of it, to trade when it's high and rebuy a little bit when it's low, but never with your whole stock, only with a tiny percentage of what you have. You fill that gap sometimes that sits in your day-to-day living expenses, and you say, okay, this year, if I can sell this amount of units and generate an income that buys me something else which is better, that's okay. Got a worried little dog here. Obviously I was walking through his patch of land with olive trees. Yes, that is the Mediterranean Sea at the end of that field. I began by saying that Bitcoin can be complicated in terms of the guidance or the ideas that we are fed with. But more than anything, I think it is crazy to ignore it as an asset. It's been the best performing asset of the last 10 years. I sold a lot of my traditional stocks this year so that I could split more money into Bitcoin. And every time that rent comes in or there is an opportunity for different revenue streams, then it makes sense for me to buy more Bitcoin. I dollar cost average every week, I buy some, but also I look at income for a month and then I take a percentage of that, and that is added to the basket. And that's completely apart from owning a masternode and having access to mining packages, which are my most regular daily income in terms of securing satoshis. So think very carefully about putting Bitcoin into your retirement portfolio, but don't just think of it as a long-term future hold for dear life. Think about Bitcoin as one of the assets that sits in your portfolio and is there to give you the opportunity, whether you take it or not is a different thing, but it gives you the opportunity to sell when you might need revenue. My best cash flow, going back to those 4 legs on the table, is the rental income. Previously it was salary income, but that no longer is there. So it's the rental income that is my most likely source of covering day-to-day expenses or meeting exceptional expenses like travel or hotels or air tickets. And make Bitcoin a strong part of your portfolio so that you have that stable platform of revenue to cover your expenses. And remember that retirement is not the future. Retirement is something you build for and you add to all the time as you look at your numbers and you say, I want to have a secure situation where I'm not dependent upon any one single given income. I'm in a place where instead I'm in control of the revenue that comes in.